Educational conversations are filled with anecdotes of failure. But in the midst of the sad tales, there are success stories. And one of the most notable success stories is taking place in New York City. At the center of this story is the Julia Richman Education Complex, known as JREC.
I put this building up against any school in the Board of Education system, 5 boroughs.
It's the best place I have ever worked.
My kids love being here. As a matter of fact, I've had enough students who don't want to graduate because we have literally created a familiar environment.
Good morning. Hello. Good morning. What's the matter? Your leg hurts?
The story of JREC really runs against the tide because what the public has come to understand about education is usually seen through the lens of failure. What we have at Julia Richman is a success story.
You're standing in an institution that has shown that our educators, that our administrators, our teachers, our professionals know how to redesign and know how to educate children, know how to take large schools and break them into small academies.
Redesigning high schools is one of the most difficult tasks facing us in really bringing urban education to the level that it needs to be. Many other schools need the kind of innovation and redesign that this complex achieved over the last decade.
This place speaks to its success, and it's been shown to succeed.
Probably the most important thing anyone can say about the transformation of Julia Richman from a single large school into 6 small successful schools is that it changed everything except the kids.
Can the police officer look in the car?
We wanted to take the same school that housed over 2,000 kids and make 6 smaller independent schools offering a variety of options to the population.
The same population that was failing courses, cutting classes, and not graduating now attends school regularly, passes courses, and enrolls in college in record numbers.
Very simply stated, Julia Richman Education Center is the best example in the United States of a multiplex, of a group of very effective schools that share a common facility. There's not a better example in the United States, and it's a group of schools that's showing really outstanding results.
Join me in welcoming the mayor of the city of New York, Michael Bloomberg.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. It is an enormous pleasure to me to be here. I have been in this school probably more than I've been in any other New York City school.
In the very beginning, Julia Richman drew its population from all over the city. It was the premier girls' school in New York. In 1968, like all New York City single-sex schools, Julia Richman became co-ed. But still, it drew its population from all over New York. In 1975, New York City suffered massive budget cuts across the services, and the school system lost 12,000 teachers. Julia Richman suffered tremendously.
When I came here, it was in such deplorable condition, it was unbelievable. In fact, colleagues had said to me that I come down and look at the condition of the building before asking to be transferred. And my comment to them was, can't be that bad, it's in Midtown Manhattan, in the excellent neighborhood. So they said, you are in for a rude awakening. Well, let me tell you, when I walked in here, I was rudely awakened. The place was filthy, in disrepair. The vandalism with graffiti was unbelievable. My staff were really at their wits' end because they'd fix one thing, and by the next day it was broken again.
The classrooms were overcrowded, so if you had a few people that were distracting the class, nobody was learning.
When we came here, there was still the old Julia Richman High School. I kept getting calls, come to the room, there's an intruder in the school. What it really was some student who the teacher was frightened of. They just didn't have the relationship with the student that made for a reasonable teaching experience, and they were scared of the kids they had in the school.
Kids began to feel that Julia Richman wasn't a welcoming, supportive environment.
Things began to get very rough. It became so rough that all the stores were locked along the streets.
People would say to me, "You're gonna go to Julia Richman? Don't walk alone in the halls," you know. And my husband actually was very worried that I was even going to work here. People would constantly break in here. I had my stethoscope stolen. I had needles stolen. I would not know what I would find when I would open the door.
We didn't walk alone. We was paired up. Most of the time it was 2 officers together, along with an NYPD cop.
The place was failing, okay? And no matter how many times we tried to do something new with it or put new leadership in it, it needed a major systemic overhaul.
And that systemic overhaul meant transforming the building into a complex. 2 innovative ideas were central to redesigning the space into an educational complex: phasing out and hot housing. Phasing out meant the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders stayed in Julia Richman until graduation, while the new small schools were hot housed in off-site locations and then moved into the complex.
You can't design a perfect situation, because if we could do that, then we would just replicate it. And there is no such thing as the perfect school for any community, other than some basic principles.
6 design principles guided this transformation: multi-age community, autonomous schools, school space, shared services, common space, and governance.
What was at the heart of what we were trying to establish was strong communities that were intergenerational. The most natural way people learn things is in the context of a community, and that we have cut kids off, and that a good educational community is made up of multi-generations. So putting nothing but adolescents in a building means you're celebrating sometimes some of the least attractive aspects of adolescent culture in our society. And I think even adolescents look at the world differently when they know there are young children around, and that it softens their way of interacting with each other.
You're so cute.
So the complex has an infant-toddler center for the children of teen parents, and an elementary school, a middle school, high schools, and a teacher center, all together in the same building. By making the complex multi-generational and sharing space in many different ways, we found a way to reshape the building's culture.
The high school principals were very committed to the idea of having an elementary school. I was actually trying to persuade them, you know, they're cute the first 2 years, and then they start growing, and they're not cute anymore because their needs and demands become very similar to what your students' needs. And they kept reassuring me that those things were workable, that the tone that an elementary school would set would be beneficial to everyone in the building.
We wanted it to be as exciting and as diversified as possible.
So we wanted to develop a culture in which kids imagine what it would be like to be in a community in which When a class is over, you still keep talking about what was going on in that class.
Really? Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that wealth is caused by materialism of the people, which is...
The teachers walking by in halls would chat with young people.
Wonderful. You did
He's a good lad. He worked real hard.
It sounds good, almost.
The second design principle focused on the creation of autonomous learning communities, small enough to make decisions for themselves.
Strong communities can't be more than a few hundred. The people who influence us, dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen. So that's about the size a faculty should be, a few dozen. Don't speak in a single voice, but speak in a shared voice, so they can pass on that kind of culture to kids. And that required schools small enough for grown-ups to be serious, thoughtful adults, and also small enough for kids to make connections with them.
I don't know. Why do you think they stopped moving?
At Julia Richman, 6 small autonomous schools foster personalization and create intellectually challenging environments. Ella Baker is a pre-kindergarten to 8th grade elementary school.
A is a vowel. You have to put consonants. A, E, O, A, I, E, N, O, and U.
Vanguard is a secondary school belonging to the Coalition of Essential Schools.
An active reader and underline, highlight different sections, and we are going to stop and discuss things periodically.
The man who sees most eye to eye with Lord Apollo is Tiresias, and from him you might learn most clearly the truth for which you are searching.
Manhattan International is a high school for new English language learners.
Okay, so you got the right answer, right? Okay, the rest of you who aren't participating are checking, right? To see if they got it right? But if you understand this, and if you could solve these, you guys should be proud. These aren't easy.
P226M is a junior high school for children with autism.
1,500 divided by 65.
That's a lot. It's like a horrible time to know.
Talent Unlimited is a performing arts high school. Urban Academy is an inquiry-based, ungraded high school.
At the bottom of the hill is the force in the front of the car different than the
As part of the original planning team for the complex, Urban Academy was asked to relocate and serve as an anchor school in the redesigned building. Its principal serves as the JREC building manager. At Julia Richman, the 6 autonomous schools do not merely exist. Instead, they have created an entirely new model for thinking about education. Each of the 6 schools has its own principal, its own faculty, students, parent body, budget, and union representative. Each school in the complex has its own schedule. There aren't any bells at Julia Richman. Each school decides how it wants to use time.
Autonomy is very important for any school. Most schools don't have to think about it because most schools have their own building and they're their own school. There's only one school. Autonomy doesn't really begin to get magnified until you have another program, another school in the same building. And in our case, we went from 1 big high school to 6. So how do you go to 6 and maintain your own autonomy? Was a critical issue.
The autonomous schools could use their own space any way they chose. This use of space represents design principle number 3.
I guess one of the biggest things is trying to have the building laid out so that each school has their own territory, shall we say, their own area that they function in.
Everybody know where they need to be. Even if they go over, they know that they're not supposed to be there, and they respect that.
What's happening here?
I mean, they have designed it so it's easy to trust kids.
Did you start the comparison?
They've taken this big building and broken it into, communities and created all these structures where you can tell where kids are supposed to be, and people who know the kids are close to them. But underneath it is, if we set things up right, we can trust kids and we can trust adults to work well.
There are no lockdowns between schools. There are open hallways, and yet the kids know their spaces. They know when it's appropriate to come through, when it's not appropriate.
In addition to the space reserved for each school, the complex includes 3 building-wide support facilities, which provide services to all the staff and students in the complex. First Steps, which is the Infant Toddler Center.
Want to read more? Baby bug.
The Mount Sinai Student Health Center.
All your tests are absolutely fine. You're a very healthy teenager.
And the Center for Inquiry, a professional development center for teachers.
17.2 grams of water, which was only 5.3 times its weight.
What we did is we had the kid down.
Each provides services to all the staff and students in the complex.
Write up a article for Consumer Reports based on their analysis.
The use of all shared facilities, such as the gyms, cafeteria, auditorium, mini theater, dance room, and ceramic studio, must be scheduled.
Most of the time, we schedule our own classes into these shared space, and it really happens because we're on different schedules.
Scheduling is one of the building manager's most important responsibilities.
I try to schedule the common spaces equitably, so I wait till everybody's got their requests in. And then where there's conflicts, I don't say, well, you get this and you get that. What I do is I put the people together and try to work out what works.
When I go to him at 7 o'clock in the morning and said, I need room 100 next Thursday at 7 a.m., and he says, you can't, it's been scheduled. I said, no, but I really need it, because my thing is important to my school. And he says, well, you have to talk to that school. And I can go and talk to that school and negotiate and go back to him and say, okay, I have it.
In this book, the devil stands stripped of all his brute disguises. Here you have all your familiar spirits.
Call the lawyer and sue me, sue me. What can you do me? I love you.
These facilities are available to all the schools in the complex.
On the top and fill in with a little bit more clay.
As one school, we only use the pottery probably 2 days out of the week. So it would be, you know, if I had to use it all by myself, I wouldn't want to invest all of the money on a teacher by myself. But collectively, we can, you know, create enough of a program for one teacher so that, you know, he or she can be used on a full-time basis. And, you know, as collectively, we can then pay for the supplies needed to maintain it.
Oh, nice! Amy Velez, isn't that gorgeous? Isn't that beautiful?
The Julia Richman Complex is governed by the Building Council, a body composed of the 6 schools and shared programs in the complex.
Rob is here from Vanguard, Earl is here from TU, Roy is here from...
The Building Council has adopted the consensus model of decision-making used by Urban Academy.
I think what we should do is lay out areas of concern.
Meetings are facilitated by the building manager, who is one of the building's principals, annually selected by the council. The Building Council makes decisions about everything affecting the complex, from security to maintenance to building-wide celebrations.
How long did it take you to make all?
2 months.
2 months?
To the establishment of a building-wide sports program.
Probably the fundamental principle that we're built on is the concept of shared decision-making and collaboration. I think what happens in the Building Council is really what sets the tone in the building.
Next Tuesday, from 1 to 3, in the auditorium, we're having the ISO concert, which a lot of us are involved in. And if you can get some kids there, it would be excellent. Are there any agenda items that people would like us to consider?
The Building Council, that is the place where we all bring our individual agendas and try to make them a collective agenda. With the understanding that not all individual agendas can be addressed there. We meet weekly. We average from 1.5 hours to 2 hours.
We meet religiously. I mean, no excuses. I mean, we're all very busy in our schools.
The priority is always our schools and our kids. So we meet at the end of the day.
We really make an effort to address issues together, to listen to one another. That has to be absolutely done. You have to respect that institution that we've created. And once you do that, you can work with one another. And frankly, I think over time, as I always like to say, we actually like each other.
Every conversation always goes back to what's the best for all of us? Because what we want for our schools, we want for all.
What after-school activities would we like to plan that would be joint for the whole school, and can we do them? Those are items that we've had left over. I'd like to look at...
We as leaders look at the bigger picture. We're not only concerned about the Vanguard High School or our individual schools, but we look at the bigger picture in the building.
What's good for Vanguard is good for me. We hope that what's good for us will also be good for Vanguard. To always think that way as you make decisions, that it's got to be good for the system, for what we created here. And that's part of the success. All the athletic teams are integrated among all the schools, which is great. I mean, we don't have our team versus their team. We have the JREC team, that represents the entire building and represents all of the schools. And that's something we had to come to a compromise on, because originally we had teams representing a separate school. That has been also something that's evolved.
I mean, when the kids in the timeout, when they come out of the timeout, they sort of put all their hands together and they'll go, on 3 JREC, 1, 2, 3, JREC. And so that establishes an identity for the school as a building and not just Vanguard, Urban, Manhattan International, etc.
The Building Council actually is very helpful for me, because about once a month or so I get on the agenda and I have everybody in the same room, so that's helpful. And I usually, either talk about something very important or something that at least I know they're all in the same room and they all can hear me.
Clearly, as collaborative communities, complexes represent a powerful voice for change. The question is, how will centralized bureaucracies respond to this voice? Will they have the flexibility and vision to celebrate these successful new structures and honor the consensus model? Or will they continue to rely on past rules and regulations to determine policy?
You can always use the policies of the system to stop anything you want. That's what school systems and central bureaucracies are great at. Saying, no, you can't do this, here's the rule why you can't do it. The reverse has to take place, and there has to be an attitude of here's the regulation and the rule. How can we make it work for this school in terms of allowing them to do what they want to do?
Well, as we face the larger threat of standardization and centralization of schooling, the very heart of the idea of Julia Richman is endangered. In other words, Julia Richman is built on the conviction that the grown-ups who constitute a school have to have real serious authority.
Just because they went downtown doesn't mean that they know the answers. And an attitude issue with regard to respecting the people out there in the field who deal with the kids every day and listening to what they have to say and what they think makes sense.
They're doing like the elective thing.
Only the people who are living this life here really understand what we need. And that is one of the major problems that we have with the system, is that the people who do the work are not respected for the decisions they make.
It's interesting, our whole way of working in the building council is to reach a consensus. But that's not understandable often to the bureaucrats, to the higher up administrators, because they feel there has to be a decision made. And they're used to having a building principle, no matter how many schools are in the building. It doesn't work that way here. We get a consensus around the table. And if we don't get a consensus, we keep talking and we keep talking.
They're real fighters in some way. I mean, they don't let other people make decisions for them when these are decisions that we need to make within the building.
The Nile starts right up here, sort of right at the Mediterranean, and goes all the way down.
The focus of the place is the kids, okay? And kids feel that there is a supportive environment for them as a human being.
They're committed to the school, they're committed to themselves. I mean, it's changed the way I provide care for them. And now the kid says things like, I can't come, that's math. The first time they said that, we were like, you really? Oh, all right, fine. We were so happy to hear that. You know, before they used to come down and say, great, make sure it's during math.
You divide by negative 1.9 and you get 5.6.
We've just witnessed a completely different change. The kids are not noisy and rowdy on the street.
There are a lot of people in the building that like working here. And I think there's a feeling like we have something special.
I feel that I can be an artist here. It's really a special place. It's really a very special place.
I wouldn't be here if I wasn't enjoying it. I am doing it because they have a great group of guys here. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Her facial expression means something in the background. That one's kind of, it's nice, but it's plain a little.
So, we're doing very good. I'm proud to be a part of this school.
Each of us working in this building have been given an incredible privilege to lead schools.
I feel extremely fortunate after all these years to end up in a building where there are such smart teachers and such interested educators. I feel very lucky.
It's like marble.
Yeah. In other schools that I have had, usually teachers were out the door with the students. This is the only school that we have to ask teachers to remove themselves from the room so that we can clean them and ask them, please go home.
What Julia Richman is really about is a change in education culture and changing it to a professional culture where the decisions and the knowledge base and the capacity of the professionals in the actual schools is respected.
The City of New York is proud and pleased to honor all that it has done to advance the education of the city's children and for its innovative approach.
Not only have I grown academically and gained more knowledge in the school that I truly do cherish, but I've grown as a person, as the way I view the world, and I think that I wouldn't have gotten this kind of education anywhere else.
We know we're getting a quality education, and
And we know our teachers are working hard to make sure we not only meet high standards, but exceed them.
What they managed to do here was hold on to a good idea. They could walk in here and say, wow, isn't this marvelous? At the very least, we want to hold on to this one, not let it disappear. And use their talent to try to figure out how we can create another Julia Richman.
Stand beside her, please guide her with your light from your light from above.